In Episode 5, titled Trace the SAF Lifecycle, we follow the security assessment framework step by step so the journey from a first planning conversation to a living authorization feels orderly instead of opaque. The framework is not a mystery. It is a path with recurring markers that keep teams aligned and stakeholders confident. By walking that path deliberately, planning, documenting, testing, deciding, and then monitoring, you learn where time actually goes and which artifacts unlock the next gate. This matters because small sequencing errors, like drafting before scoping or testing before evidence is stable, create avoidable rework and tension with reviewers. Our goal in this tour is practical fluency. You will be able to name where you are, what you owe, who needs it, and what must be true to move on. Orientation begins with planning, and good planning marries expectations, scope, and sponsorship into a workable charter. The security assessment framework in the FedRAMP world assumes that you know why you are seeking authorization, who will decide, and which environment you will actually assess. During orientation, teams confirm the target baseline, the likely route, joint authorization board or agency, and the calendar constraints of both the provider and the reviewers. The conversation is candid about risks, where controls are strong, where gaps are known, and which dependencies must be ready. A simple orientation brief that names these factors and proposes a milestone map aligns product, security, engineering, and operations. When everyone understands the path, the first scheduling friction evaporates, and early decisions become easier to defend later. Readiness is where expectations turn into defined scope and sponsorship alignment. Scope means a crisp boundary with included components, administrative interfaces, and data flows. Alignment means a sponsor who agrees that the described system matches a mission need and that authorization is worth the effort. In readiness, teams also stage foundational capabilities, ticketing, logging, vulnerability scanning, configuration management, so that evidence will exist when an assessor asks to see it. The readiness checkpoint is not ceremonial. It is the moment you decide if the description of the system, the maturity of controls, and the cadence of operational activities are solid enough to withstand independent testing. If the answer is not yet, you adjust now, when adjustments cost days instead of months. If the answer is yes, the rest of the life cycle benefits from that discipline. Part of readiness may include pursuing the FedRAMP Ready designation through a Readiness Assessment Report, or RAR, conducted by an accredited third-party assessment organization, or 3PAO, after first mention. This focused appraisal validates that the boundary is credible, key controls exist, and documentation can be completed to program standards. It is a quick but rigorous exam of preparedness, not a full assessment, and it creates a public signal to sponsors that you are a realistic candidate for authorization. Teams that use the RAR well treat it as a feedback loop. They remediate shortfalls revealed in the appraisal, refine their system security plan outline, and calibrate timelines based on evidence gaps discovered. The result is a sharper entry into formal documentation and a clearer message to potential agency partners about readiness. Documentation is the backbone of the life cycle because it translates engineering reality into a security narrative that reviewers can examine. The System Security Plan, or SSP, is the centerpiece, your system biography with boundary diagrams, data paths, trust zones, and control implementations. Attachments carry weight too. Rules of behavior, incident response plans, configuration baselines, inventories, encryption key management procedures, and inheritance mappings to authorized platforms. Evidence must be durable, traceable, and dated. Tickets that show closure, logs that demonstrate detection, screenshots that reveal configured settings, and approvals that confirm accountability. Good teams write for reuse, using clear sectioning and stable references so an agency reviewer or the JAB can navigate quickly. In documentation, clarity is speed, ambiguity is delay. Write to answer the questions you know an assessor will ask, and your testing window will feel like confirmation rather than discovery. Assessment converts claims into observations through independent testing. The 3PAO conducts interviews, samples configurations, reviews change history, inspects logs, and executes technical tests that match the required baseline. The output is the Security Assessment Report, or SAR, which records testing methods, results, and findings in language authorizing officials can trust.
A strong assessment is predictable because documentation was stable, scope was honored, and evidence lived where the SSP said it would. When the 3PAO can trace a control from narrative to configuration to sample without detours, the SAR reads as a coherent picture rather than a collage. Findings are not failures. They are opportunities to demonstrate responsible remediation and build credibility. What matters is that each finding links to a plan with owners and realistic dates.
Authorization is the decision phase where risk is evaluated and formal approval is issued. In the agency route, an authorizing official reviews the package, the SSP, the SAR, and the remediation plan to decide whether to issue an authorization to operate, or ATO, after first mention. In the Joint Authorization Board route, the JAB may grant a provisional authorization to operate, or PATO, which agencies can later reuse with focused reviews. In both cases, the decision weighs residual risk against mission value and the quality of evidence presented. A tidy package, a clean narrative of inheritance, and a disciplined approach to fixing findings shorten deliberation. The authorization letter captures conditions and timelines, transforming assessment into operational accountability. From this point on, the calendar belongs as much to continuous monitoring as to project management. Continuous monitoring sustains posture by proving that controls continue to operate after authorization. Monthly vulnerability scans, patch metrics, account recertifications, incident reporting, and change tracking create a pulse that reviewers can measure. Reports are not busy work. They are the living record of a security system doing what it claims to do. Treat continuous monitoring as an operating model, not a compliance chore. Assign owners, automate collection where possible, and link artifacts to the control identifiers used in your SSP. When the time comes for an annual reassessment or a new agency review, you will present a year of evidence without scrambling. Confidence grows when the story remains true between decision points, and continuous monitoring is how you keep it true. Consider a practical example that ties these phases together. A software-as-a-service provider emerges from assessment with a handful of moderate findings, each documented in the SAR. Instead of letting those findings sit as abstract statements, the team builds a plan of action and milestones, POA&M after first mention, that assigns each item to a named owner, defines specific remediation steps, and sets completion dates aligned to risk. Operations links each entry to a ticket, so progress is auditable. Engineering documents configuration changes that close the gap, and security updates the SSP to reflect the corrected state. In the next continuous monitoring report, the team highlights closures with evidence attached. The agency sees movement, not promises, and the next decision proceeds faster because credibility has compounding effects. A common pitfall sneaks in early: weak boundary scoping that complicates assessment accuracy. When the boundary is vague, assessors encounter components that are sort of in or temporarily out, inheritance lines that are asserted but not traced, and administrative paths that lack explicit control descriptions. The consequence is predictable: expanded sampling, more findings, schedule slips, and a package that feels unstable. The antidote is ruthless clarity during readiness and documentation. Name every externally provided service that enforces controls you plan to inherit, tie it to a current authorization, and show how your architecture actually uses those protections. Enumerate administrative consoles, service accounts, and jump paths. Then explain the access model and monitoring coverage. Precision here makes later testing clean and saves weeks. One quick advantage you can seize is to plan milestones backward from the target authorization date. Start with a decision meeting on the calendar, then work in reverse: package freeze, 3PAO testing window, evidence cutoff, documentation lock, internal control verifications, and readiness checks. This backward design exposes dependencies you might otherwise miss, like waiting on a hosting platform's updated authorization letter for inheritance or needing an extra cycle to stabilize a configuration baseline. It also creates a schedule that resists optimism bias because the immovable end date forces realism about durations and overlaps. Share this backward plan with sponsors and assessors early. Alignment on the critical path is worth more than aspirational Gantt charts that crumble under real workload. A mental run-through can keep the team synchronized without burning hours in meetings. Picture the kickoff with roles named, the boundary displayed, the evidence location stated, and the 3PAO's sampling approach acknowledged.
Move forward to the testing window, where requests arrive in predictable batches, owners retrieve artifacts from known systems of record, and daily check-ins clear blockers quickly. Now jump to the decision briefing, where you present the system in plain language, summarize the SAR themes, show the POA&M progress, and explain any conditions you propose. This mental rehearsal is short, but it exposes soft spots. If a step feels hazy, it probably needs a preparatory task or a clarified owner. Practice makes the real thing calmer. There is an anchor phrase worth keeping close: plan, document, test, decide, monitor. Plan aligns expectations and scope, so sponsorship has something solid to back. Document translates architecture and operations into a coherent story with evidence. Test converts claims into observations through independent assessment. Decide weighs residual risk against mission need and issues a formal authorization. Monitor proves the story stays true in production. When a conversation wanders or a status meeting loses its plot, bring it back to this phrase and name exactly where you are. The framework is not just a sequence, it is a shared vocabulary for progress. For a rapid review, name the outputs that each phase must deliver so you can tell at a glance whether the phase is complete. Planning delivers a milestone map, a boundary intent, and a sponsorship agreement that commits people and time. Documentation delivers a stable SSP with attachments, an evidence library that maps to controls, and clear inheritance references. Assessment delivers the SAR with findings described and evidence cited in a way decision makers can rely on. Authorization delivers the ATO or PATO letter with conditions that translate into operational obligations. Continuous monitoring delivers recurring reports and closure records that show controls continue to function and gaps shrink. These outputs are not optional. They are the tangible signs that the lifecycle is working. We close by returning to the practical question: where are you right now, and what should you do next? Identify your current phase honestly, even if the answer is between two, because documentation drifts while testing starts. Update the plan based on that reality. Adjust dates, confirm owners, and call out any dependency you do not control. A living plan is the hallmark of a mature team. It reflects conditions rather than pretending they do not exist. When you anchor your work in the security assessment framework, you reduce surprise, increase trust, and move through authorization with steadier footing. The next step is straightforward. Mark your phase, update your schedule, and brief your stakeholders with the anchor phrase as your guide. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.